Hi there. What we want to do in this tutorial is to go over some basics of Python. And one of the first things you always do when you learn a language is to print, learn how to use the print statements. So in programming, all right, normally you write code and then you execute the code and you see what the output is. That's basically what programming is, right? So here I'm going to write something really simple, print and a world, right? So in Python, when you want to output a text on the screen, right, you use the print statement. Just like that print statement, I normally use a space, and then you open parentheses, right? Make sure you have a closed parentheses, matching closed parentheses on the end as well. And then if you're trying to output a text, right, then you have to have a single quote such as like that, right? So if I now, I have already saved this file, so I'm just going to hit run on it here, and you see on the left side says hello world, right? I can also do something like and say print. Anytime you print, if you have to have a open and close parentheses, and inside, if it's a text or if it's a number such as something like that number, then you just put a number like that. No need to have it in a single parenthesis, right? So that one, remember another thing, when you use a pound sign in Python, right? A pound sign means there's a comment, right? This is a comment. That means the Python compiler or the interpreter would completely ignore it. It won't even read that line. So basically, I can go here and I can say, this is another comment, right? And I can put a whole bunch of code here, right? Line number 3 would be ignored altogether, all right? So you will see me in my tutorials that I would put comments all the time, right? So this is how you can output integer to the screen, integer value to the console. Now you will hear me sometimes say this screen that I'm talking about, sometimes I call this interpreter. These are also called console, right? See that word console? That means the output is going to happen on the other side. So run it again, and I'm going to save it. You see that there's a 2, 3, 4, right? So that's the other way to print things out. You can also do something like this. Print, you can put hi, right? And then a comma, another comma, and then I can put my pay is another comma. I don't know what the comma, and then I can put some number there. So you see this line is a combination of text and also a combination of either decimal or a integer value, number value. But something new here is that I'm separating by a comma, right? Separating by a comma. So when I run this, you see what happens is it will print it out, but also it will kind of combine everything together, right? Combine everything together in one line. Now, that line does not make too much sense, but this other one will make sense. So I'm going to say here, right? Many times you use variables, right? You use several kinds of variables. And in this, let's just create some variables. So what are variables? Variables are, it's almost like an object or a container or a bucket that holds something, right? It holds a value. Value could be a text value, or could be a number value. It holds something, right? That's a variable. So for example, when I say my name, right? My name, right? My name, and I'm going to put here with a single quote, just put Robert here, right? So this is a variable that is holding a string value. How do we know it's a string value? Because there is a single quote around it, right? Single quote. Python also allows double quote, and when I say double quote, I mean, I'm talking about this. The double quote, that would be valid too, but just as a habit, I don't use double quote in Python. I always use single quote. Right. So now you see, I have a variable called my name, right? And that variable is holding a string value. And then I'm going to put here let me just put my hourly pay, right? My hourly pay, and I'm just going to make something up here, 66.34, right? So now that you see, anytime I mention the word my hourly pay, you know right away that it is 66.34, because initially we set it up that way. Anytime I say my name, you know it's Robert, right? So that's the whole idea of a variable. Variable is a is a text. I mean, it's a, it's, I call it a container or a bucket or a envelope that that can hold a value, right? Can you imagine? So here's something else. Okay, I got my name, my hourly pay, and let's just say my my employer, right? Employer, I'm gonna put here Walmart, right? Okay, so I have three variables, and I want to print them out. And the way to print them out, I can say print, and here I can say my name is, single quote, all right, hold on, please. All right, so I'm saying my name is, it will put whatever value is sitting in that, and then I'm going to say my pay is, right, space hourly pay, comma, and then I'm going to say put a dot, a period, and then my employer, make this a little bigger. All right, so let's understand what this is, right? When you're trying to output some text onto the screen, right? Anything that you want to appear exactly the way you type it, you have to use a single quote, right? Something like that, right? Put in a single quote, and then I'm creating this long line of text, right? But I'm joining some values that's been sitting in my variables, right? I'm joining some values. So you watch when I run this, how it shows up as a text, right? So okay, there's a problem there, and all right, very good. It says, anytime you see a red, that means there's a problem. That means we're missing something, and it says name my employer is not defined. Did you mean employer with an R? So in my code, I missed an R here, right? And that's why that was an error. So going back to this and run it, and you see how it prints the whole thing together in a string, right? Whole thing together. So in other languages, if you have to do that in other languages, I think you can do that in Python too. Another way of doing that is you can say, I'm going to copy this line out. Okay, well, let me just work together. My name is, and then I can put a plus sign, because a plus sign also allows you to concatenate. Concatenate means join strings together, right? That's what it is. So you can use a plus sign, my name, another plus here, right? My pay is so this will probably create an error, but I want to show you too what would happen. Plus, and then I'm going to put my employer. Right? So that is another way of doing it. The reason I'm showing you this is that I know many of you have programmed either in Java or maybe C++. I know in Java you can add strings together this way. You can concatenate things with a plus sign, right? In Python, you can do that too. But the problem is that you will have if any of these variables is holding a number, whether it's an integer, whether it's a decimal kind of number, then you'll get an error saying, hey, you're trying to add a text, right? A text with a number, right? It's not allowed. So here it says sometimes it's good. Sometimes it gives you a nice error. It says, you can only concatenate, you can only add strings together, but that is a number. So I think what you have to do, you have to convert this to a string. I believe that will work too, right? You have to convert, you have to convert the value sitting in that variable to a string, right? So run it again, and it will, it runs properly, all right? I like this other method easier because you just put a comma and it works, everything works okay, all right? So that is on print and stuff. Now, if you have a background in either C++, C, or maybe Java, you know that when you declare a variable, you have to say integer, integer my age, right? You have to declare what kind of data your variable will be holding, right? And in Python, right, this is not required, right? The data type declaration, is not required. All right, so that means that is not going to work. All right, sorry that I got a little bit cough today, but all right, so if I, basically there are maybe 3 or 4 kinds of very common variables that you can use. And one of the very common ones we normally start with is like an integer, right? Integer. And in Python, like I said, you don't have to tell that it's going to be an integer. You just put, you just write the variable name. So my age is equals to 88, right? And the Python already knows that since this is a number, an integer value, then that variable automatically is an integer, right? And remember, when you declare a variable, right? When you create a variable, couple of ways to do it. All right. I don't like my variable to have capital start with the uppercase name. So instead of my age, I don't like this. I always, that will work too, right? You can have variables. So let's talk about variable names, right? Variable naming conventions, right? So what is allowed, right? This is allowed, right? You can have something like this. You can have my age equals 9, right? You can have my age equals 9 or whatever it is, or you can have my age, right? Or there's a lot. You can also have, I mean, my age. That would be allowed as well. I just don't like capitalized variable names that way, because sometimes when you use a full, all capital letters, that means something in other languages, right? Like in C++ and Java, that means that's a constant value. So avoid that. You can use it if if you have if you want to treat that as a constant value type of thing, or static value. Okay, that's allowed. And then you can basically anything you can do with the text, right? And I think in terms of special characters, underscore is allowed, right? So you can have my age, right? Underscore is allowed. And then also, I believe the pounds, the $sign is allowed too, but I'm not going to teach you that because I don't like, hardly see it. Just off the traditionally $sign with the variable name doesn't really look good, right? So I'm not going to say that at all. Now, this is what's not allowed, right? Not allowed. You cannot have right? Your variable naming cannot start with a number, right? So variable with a number, right? It cannot start with a number. Variable name cannot start with a number, and it cannot start with any of these special characters too, right? You can use one of those, or even, n%, right? Right. So, variable name. Right. So bottom line, right? Instead of thinking about what is not allowed, pay attention to what is allowed. You could have a text, right? Or the other one I forgot is you can say, my age 33. That is allowed too. You can start with a text and end with the number, or you can even have a number here too, right? That is okay, as long as as long as it starts with a character, right? And when I say character, I'm talking about A to Z, uppercase, lowercase, right? A to Z, or underscore, right? These will be all valid. I'm going to take this not allowed out, at least. Well, maybe leave it. So that is how you declare a variable. Now, the other thing very important to keep in mind is that when you declare a variable, make sure it means something, right? So I'm going to put some numbers on the board here, and I want you to, basically guess what those are. So I'm going to say X is equals to 1450, 1450 rather, right? Y is equals to $70, right? $70, 70.50. Let's just put a 50 here, right? Now, do you have any clue what these numbers mean? When I say my age, you probably know what it is. It makes sense, right? But when I say X, which is holding 1450, you don't know what these are, right? You don't know what these are. In some cases, it's okay to use X, Y, I, single character kind of thing. But in many cases, you want to have variable that makes sense to you, because you come back 2 months after, you want to know what that means. So instead of X, what if I change this and say monthly rent, right? And here I can say my cell bill, right? Phone bill. Right, now that makes sense. So it's important to ensure that the variables that variable names must make sense. All right. Okay, so that is it. Now everything you've seen here, these are just concept and concept and standards that you want to use when declaring variables, right? Other things that you want to know that is important is sometimes you will okay, so let's talk about the kinds of variables that we have, right? Kinds of variables. First one, you see an integer. So I'm going to say here, you have seen integer, my age, right? And then the other one I can say is my pay. I think I've used my pay, but I'm going to put my pay here. So that my pay, right? That is a float. I mean, it's a decimal, but the proper term to use to describe it is a float, right? It's a floating point number. That's why the data type is a float, right? And then you have, of course, float. Even if you have a a string, like you say, like I showed you, a string is single quote. All right. And then string is single quote. What else? You can also do something like this. You can say fruit 1, right? Fruit 2, fruit 3 is equals to apple, right? And then put a orange here, right? And then put a banana, right? So what happens is that that first element would be assigned to the first variable. Excuse me. Right. The second variable would be assigned to the second value would be assigned to the second variable, and so forth. Right. You can do that. And if I want to print this out, basically the way I print out, I simply say print, fruit fruit one. Spelling correct? Hopefully it's correct, right? And it will go ahead and print that for you. All right, so that is that. We've looked at how to go about. We've looked at how to go about assigning variables, right? So that is that. And then, okay, other thing that we want to look at too. Now, the way Python works, right? The way Python works is that it it knows a lot of things about what you're trying to do. Okay, and what I mean with that is that, for example, like that line, right? You can also say, and I'm going to use XYZ just for simplicity, just XYZ, and I can say equals to 450. Right, XYZ is equal to 450. What do you think that does? How do you think this is different from this top line, right? In line number 37, each of these values gets assigned to each of the variables. Here, 450 gets assigned to each of the variables, right? So XYZ all have 450, right? XYZ all have 450. This bad cough just been lingering around, right? Now, okay, so you have seen integer data types, right? Integer data types, and then you have seen a float or decimal data type, right? You have seen a okay, here we go, a string or a character, right? If it was one character, you can also say something like my first initial, right, is equal to R with a single quote. That's one character. The other one that we haven't talked about, another kind of variable, is a is payday, right? That is a Boolean. I can put true here, or I can say, is it Friday, right? I can put false here. Okay, so you see these two that I've used here, these are Boolean, right? That means they either have a true or a false value, and you can put it that way, and Python would know right away it is a it is a variable that is a Boolean data type. Okay, I'm trying to see if I'm missing anything else. Right, we talked about float. Talked about Boolean, right? Boolean is fairly simple. All right, so that is good. And then strings we talked about, right? A little bit. Maybe another lecture, I will go in detail about various things about string, but in this case, I think it's okay. All right, so I'm going to take all of this out, right? I think you have seen them. I'm going to take all of this out, and then I'm going to do some, when you do some variables, right? A lot of times either you have to join them together, or maybe you have to do some calculation on it. So I'm going to say my first name, last name, right? Two variables, and then I can say my full name. I mean, this is just a silly example, but it has the concept, right? My first name plus my last name. So when you run this, you see there'll be a problem, right? And how do I see, right? How do I see, right? How do I see how do I see if it's doing it correctly, right? How do I verify that this code is working properly? What you got to do one of the habits you need to include is, print statements, right? Right, print statements, right? Right, print statement right here, and then save this, and I'm going to run this. See, it prints my name, but there's a problem with what it printed out, right? Isn't there like a problem? The problem is it doesn't have a space in the middle, which I'd like to add. Then I can go back and I can simply put a space, and the way I can do that is just like that, space, right? Just like that. I can run this line, and you'll see now it will have a nice space in the middle, right? So you can do that type of thing and add it together, right? Adding variables together. Otherwise, let's just say I'm going to have x is equals to, well, I told everybody not to use x and y just like that. So let's just put number one. Number one is equals to 4. Number two is equals to 99, right? Number one, number two, and then I'm going to put total is equals to number one plus number two, right? How can you test if this is correct, right? How can you test? Basically, you print it out, right? You print the value, you print to check if your code if your code is calculating the value that you had in your mind, right? So here I can say, I can make it more readable. I can say something like num1, right? Comma, num2, comma, right? Equal 4. Okay, now save that and run this one. All right, it prints out a value for you. Right, and then so that is that, right? All right, you can do those two numbers. You can, if I had to do maybe instead of total, okay, sum is okay. I can do a product. Product is equals to num1 times num2. That's a product, right? And then I can also do a difference is equals to num1 minus num2. Right, that will give me a difference. And then I'm just going to put a divide here, right? That means I'm dividing them, and I can say num1 divide by num2. All right. Now there is this other concept in Python. Since I'm here, I should mention it, right? And it's called modulo, right? And you must be saying, what is modulo? It's in some programmers, a lot of programmers say mod, right? A lot of programmers say mod. All right, and the way that works is you can do something like I think it's going to put, I'm just going to put mod1 value is equals to, right, num1 mod num2. I believe you have to use num mod. I think that's what it is, mod. In other languages, you can use, well, not mod. You gotta use that sign. I mean, what is this called? This is called the ampersand, right? Ampersand. And so these two that I printed out, right? That applies to that line of code. And then I'm going to print the product. So this one would be times product, right? This one would be a difference. So I'm gonna put a minus here. All right, and then I have a division. And then I have a mod here, right? So that one, and instead of plus, I'm going to put mod. Right, and then let's go and run this thing and see what it shows up, right? So that, we know that makes sense. I'm sure that makes sense too. The difference makes sense too. Now division, right? 34 divided by 99 gives us this huge number, which possibly is correct, right? But mod, how does mod, why did mod give us 34? right? The way a mod works is that it divides 34 by 99, and whatever is the remainder, it gives you the remainder. So 34 goes in 99 0 times, right? It goes 0 times, but remainder is 34, right? So that's why it's answer 34. So if I go ahead and change these numbers, instead of 34, let's put something that makes sense. I'm going to put 10 here, and this one, let's just put 3, right? So 10 and 3, and then run this, right? You see 10 plus 3, 10 times 3, 10 minus 3. 10 divided by 3 is, of course, 3 point, 3 point whatever it is, right? That's correct. But 10 mod 3 is 1. So 10 divided by 3, whole number is 3, right? 10 divided by 3 is 3, because 3 times 3 is 9, and the remainder is 1. So that's why you get a remainder, right? So that is how basically these items work in here. All right, that is neat. Now, other ones, trying to look at my notes. Look at my notes here. So, all right, there's one more that we are missing, and that one is a a double forward division. So I'm going to say here, can I put division 2? 2 is equals to num1. Remember, I'm not using 1, I'm using 2 of them, num2, right? And then basically print out here. Now watch what happens with this one, right? See, when I use a single division, that makes sense. 10 divided by 3 is 3 1/3, right? 3 1/3, which is kind of correct, right? But 10, I don't even know what it's called. Double slash, right? Double slash, I'm not sure what this is called. But what it does is that it only gives me the whole number of that value, right? So basically 10 divided by 3 will give me the whole answer as it is. And when I use this double forward, it gives me this portion, right? And when I use a mod, it gives me what the remainder is, right? So remember that kind of equation or assignment kind of thing. All right, very well, very well. I think I'm going to look at my notes. So we talked about variables. We talked about, these are arithmetic operators, right? These are all mathematical operators. And I don't think there's anything else more than that, right? Okay, the other one that also goes here that's really good is, okay, for this one, what I got to do, for this one, maybe I should, well, that's going to come later, I think. Okay, we can do that. All right, I'm going to take all of this out, right? All of this out. Well, let me just double check I'm recording this on. If not, then I'll be, okay, very good. So I'm going to take all of this out, right? So here we're looking at Boolean operators. What are Boolean operators, right? Now, whenever you talk about Boolean operators, is you simply looking at how do you, I mean, like mathematical operators, right? It allows you to do math operations. Boolean operators allow you to do Boolean operations, right? So for example, I had a variable called x is equals to 30, and I had a y is equals to 25, right? I have two variables, two numbers here, and I can simply say, well, this one I'm trying to avoid using conditional statements. So for this example, let's go to the interpreter, right? Let's go here. I'm going to say x is equal to 45, right? Y is equal to 55. And then I'm going to say, right, x is greater than 30. I hit enter, it will say true. I'm going to say x is greater than 30 and y is less than 40. Right, that'll give me a false because y is not less than 40. I'm going to say again, x is greater than 45. Well, it is 45. So let's just go. I want to get a true here. So x is greater than 30, 25, and y is less than 89, right? You see, it gives me a true. So the simple rule to remember and to follow is that whenever you need to compare Boolean values, right, true and false values, when you have an and in the middle, that means all Boolean comparison that you have in your code needs to be return a true in order for the whole thing to be true. All right. On the other hand, I can have something like x is less than 24 or y is less than 23. So in here, right, x is definitely less than 24. That is true, right? But y is not less than 23. That's a false, right? So a true or a false will return a true to you. Oh, how did we get false, right? X is 45, x is less than 24, or y is less than 23. Yeah, this should have been a true. I'm not sure why. Maybe I hope I didn't mess anything up. Let me, right? Let me what I'm going to do. Start again. 45, y is equal to 55, and if x is greater than, no, x is less than 24, which it is true, x is less than 24, or y is less than 23, right? It gives me a false. That doesn't make sense, right? Or normally when you deal with or, one of the ones should be true. Actually, x is x is not less than 24, right? X is greater than 24, and y is not. So okay, that makes sense. Both of these are false, right? Both of these are false. If I did it like x is, right, let me try again. X is less than 65, which I know to be true, and y is less than 23. So one of them is true, right? One of them is true, and this x is less than 65 is true, right? So if I hit enter here, you see it gives me a true, right? So in order to understand this, right, the most important thing you gotta follow or memorize is what is called a truth table. And let me see if I can find one. Truth table, there is many truth tables out there. Let me see if I could some of them are very confusing. All right, this looks better. Right, this has got some other stuff which we don't need, but at least it has got things that I need. Let me bring that over. All right, so look at this here. I'm just borrowing this from Real Digital for educational purposes, right? You have 4 tables, and you know the truth table. There are many of them. You know, there's quite a few columns that need to go here. But as far as today, right? Today we're looking at, you know, you have 2 variables here, a and b, and a has got 0, 0, 1, 0. These are values assigned to it, and then b has got 0, 1, 0, 1. Those 0 represents a false value and 1 represents a true value, right? So that means um, the first row, if A is false and B is false, that means the answer is false, right? If A is false and B is true, that means the answer is false, because in an AND situation, all elements needs to be true, or all evaluation needs to be true in order for the outcome to be true, right? That's the reason in the AND truth table, the only last line, which is A is true, B evaluates to true, and the whole answer is true. Likewise, on the OR table, the only situation when everything is false, when all the equations evaluate to a false, right? You see the first one, if the equation A evaluates to a false and B evaluates to a false, then the whole thing is false. Other than that, if you have OR, right, any of those, if it is evaluates to a true, then everything is true. So we look here, this one, there's one of the elements in there is true. That's why it gives me a true. Both of these are false, right? Both of those are false. That's why that gives me a false on an OR. So that's basically how it works. More practice, you'll learn more. But I think that is actually a good start. So good luck with learning variables. Very important concept, variables, arithmetics, just the basics. This is like the basics of Python. So all the best, and I'll see you all on my next lecture.